Welcome everybody to 10 Within. I'm so excited. I have my beautiful friend Allison here today with me. Hey everybody. She is from Orange County and I invited her to come down today because we just, she's a woman of God and I just love her heart. She's such an amazing soul, beautiful on the inside and out. And I'm just really was led to have her on this podcast because I feel like her story is just so relatable to the world. I think that there's a lot of people that are in the same position that she's in, and I think that she's navigating it so gracefully, and she's just using her heart to shine from the Lord and kind of just taking, every day one step at a time and just figuring out and letting God lead her life and try to get her in the place that he wants her. And I just think that there's a lot of us out there that are just kind of lost and kind of floundering in our relationships, in our lives. And I think that it's pretty powerful to watch another friend and godly woman, also go through this and just navigate it so well. So welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here. This is I'm just so grateful for Loni and this opportunity. And hopefully we, say some stuff that relates to you guys.
So I want to say I met Allison, it had to have been 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it was a
long time ago.
While ago. And I feel like through our lives, we've always followed each other on Instagram and Facebook and just watched each other's lives blossom and grow, and the hard times and, the fun times. And then, watching your journey has just been truly so remarkable. Lots of heartbreak, lots of healing, and just lots of empowerment from me. And God just put it on my heart. He was like, reach out to her, reach out to Loni, and not just like, hi, how are you? Like, go see her. And God was very, it was amazing because he was so powerful. And it was like, it felt like my heart was just being tugged towards you. So now look at, here we are.
I know.
And
I'm so glad you put that on your heart.
Me too.
It's funny because I was also saying the same prayer, in just this season of my life, going through what I went through. I feel like, I transitioned and I actually lost a lot of friends through the transition of, losing Jimmy and getting into another relationship. And that's just like a whole nother story. But I also think that God just took and removed some people out of my life, just knowing that he had bigger plans for me. And so I remember just honestly, a few months ago when all this stuff went down and this transition happened in my life, that I just wanted to have women in my life that were on the same path, in the sense of just like on the growing path, on the, looking for God, looking for health, and, just motivated women that just really want to take their lives to the next level. And, you're a little shark. I love it. She's beautiful. She sells makeup. She just is so knowledgeable in all the skincare. I love talking girl talk with you because she's so good.
that will probably be another podcast to come. So stay tuned.
So tell us about you, Allison.
Okay. So I am 40. So I'm a mother. I have a 4-year-old little boy, and I am a wife in a very confusing marriage, I guess you could say. And I've been married for 6.5 years. We've been together for 8, and we're just going through a really, tough time. But it's important that we talk about these tough times because so much, I feel like, of life and society, nowadays, especially with like Instagram, social media, is this perfect marriage and this perfect couple and this perfect, and everybody gets to share their side of, and social media is very like one-sided, I guess, is what I mean. You get to pick what you share. Well, I think that it's highlights. I think it's so important to share the real raw stuff that goes on that nobody wants to talk about. And how, the enemy can just rip lives apart if you let him. And so for me, my husband and I have been together, like I said, for 8 years. We got together when we were kind of older. I was about 30, he was 41. And so we started a little later in life. We had some things that went on and, before we met, and that'll be like another day, another podcast. But, so we met, and he swept me off my feet, and it was wonderful, and, but I think that I was still very young, and I was still very just not knowing. I knew the Lord, but I didn't know the Lord. Like I wasn't walking the path of the Lord. And so fast forward to, a couple years into our marriage, I get pregnant, and that really is what started our journey of just the rocky road. There was, so it's all, I think, because of brokenness. I come from a very broken home, and so does my husband. And so why do we think that two people that come from such broken and just hurtful pasts, why do we think we get to come together and all of a sudden be this perfect married couple? We have no tools, we have no skills, we don't we that stuff wasn't modeled for us. And so it's just really interesting that, that's just kind of like what everybody thinks. Oh, you're going to get married and it's going to be perfect.
Mhm.
And nobody really talks about all the things that come before that, all the, the communication, all that stuff. But what happened is we just got into a really dark place. And we stopped doing the things that we liked. And we were kind of, he became my enemy. And he's supposed to be my team player. He's supposed to be, the one that lifts me up, and vice versa. And so I just felt the Lord about year 4 of us being together. And so that was like about 2.5 years ago. I felt the Lord just pulling at my heart in a way that I just can't even explain. And I just kind of was like, okay, like not right now, not right now. I'm too busy. I've got a 2-year-old and I've got this and I've got work and I've, all the things. And then finally the pain became so great, and the hurt that we had done in our marriage to each other, because we just didn't know any better, like hurt people hurt people. And I wanted him to know how much I was hurt. And so I would hurt him back.
Mhm.
And that just became this very toxic, kind of just turmoil. And we just continued to do the same thing, expecting a different result,
Mhm.
until I really told him one day. I said, you know what? I don't know where this is coming from, except for it's coming from God. And I didn't talk like this. So at first it, I think, sounded kind of foreign to him, but I said, God has been pulling at my heart, and God has been begging us to make him the center of our marriage and the center of our lives. And since we have tried to do that, it's just crazy. It's just crazy, the journey that has happened. And it hasn't all been rainbows and butterflies. It's been hurt, and it's been pain, and it's been forgiveness, and it's been a lot of things that are just really uncomfortable. And I think that that's so important, because that's kind of just where we are right now. We're trying to navigate this marriage that has had all of these things happen, and there's never been anything like infidelity or anything really, really bad, right? It's just normal everyday problems that have escalated so much to where we just can't get past it.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important, is that, everybody gets to know that, hey, like, when you don't feel supported by your spouse, like, emotional support for me was
Mhm.
huge.
Mhm.
And he didn't know how to do that. And that's of no fault of his own. He was never emotionally supported growing up, so he didn't know what that was like.
Mhm.
But when you are a woman, I
Mhm.
feel like emotional support is just a huge thing.
100%.
And so it's like we're speaking two different languages. I'm saying I need this, and he's saying I need this, and we're just not even on the same
Mhm.
page or anything. So finding out how to get grounded enough with the Lord, bring the Lord into our lives, really surrender, has just been it's been beautiful, and it's also been very big challenge. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And for, my husband, unfortunately, it's taken him a little bit of time to bring the Lord into his heart fully. And so I just feel like, where the journey that we're on right now is just kind of navigating that, and navigating what that looks like for us. Because for me, it's just such a, when the Lord pulls at your heart, it's
Mhm.
almost like you can't deny it.
100%.
It's
Yes.
it's like if you deny it,
Mhm.
for me, can sometimes almost make me, it sounds crazy, but like physically ill.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
it just gives you and everybody's different with how the
Mhm.
Lord talks to them and this and that. But
Mhm.
so for me, it's just he's pulling me and pulling me and pulling me, and I'm trying to pull this other person with me,
Yep.
who's has the trust that he just doesn't have trust with anybody, with me, and especially with something that you can't see, touch, or feel. I mean,
Mhm.
you can feel the Lord, but it's so much harder to grasp.
Yep. Totally.
And so yeah, so we're just kind of here in this weird gray area of our marriage right now, where we are separated. And that is because we just couldn't get on the same page. And that's okay. That is not something to be ashamed of. I think that um I I know that he's my person, and I know that I love him very much. At the same time, when we live in like this just toxic craziness,
Mhm,
it just makes you literally almost lose your mind.
mhm.
And we weren't on God's path. We were trying to run the show. And so since I've surrendered, things for me have kind of opened up and blossomed in a way, but in that doing that is that hurt and that pain that you
Mhm.
have to feel. But also, amazing things that God can do for us that we cannot do for ourselves.
100%.
So
Totally. Well, I think that that is what is so relatable to so many people, because I feel like you're in a relationship with somebody and you start to grow, and the person that you're with isn't
mhm,
wanting to do that same growth.
yeah.
Is what do you do and how do you navigate it? And not that we're the experts by any means.
No,
We're not
definitely.
the experts. I claimed that on my last podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not the relationship guru, but this is real life. Like, this is
Mhm.
real life stuff that it's like we are not the only ones that we know are trying to navigate. How do you handle this? Right. I mean, we make decisions when we're young.
Mhm.
I got married at 21 years old with my late husband. And when you get married at 21 years old, it's extremely hard. And I don't know if it's always been that way or if it's just more recent, because there's so many more broken, hurt
Yeah.
individuals. And when you just carry, those traumas that happen, we all have stuff happen to us in our lives that we don't recognize or don't pay attention to. And then when you get married and you
Mhm.
start to mature, and I feel like in your 20s, like 26, 27,
Mhm.
like for
Yep.
me was like kind of when that was like, I almost feel like an identity crisis of like trying to like, whoa, like
Figure
what is
out.
going on? Like figure out who you are.
Right. Mhm.
And so I started that growth journey, and it was really hard because I think a lot of times, sometimes men, and not all men, I think there's men that are into the growth, but I think women are more drawn to growth than men. Men are just workers. They have their head down. They want to provide for the family,
Right.
and they just,
The spiritual and emotional growth is not as important to them,
no, not at all.
but it's so important.
It is in
Yeah.
order to have like a healthy marriage. And so, I think what we both talk about is, how do you navigate that when your partner is not really wanting or willing
Mhm.
to have the growth, right? Like, we both are people that are not wanting to sit here and be like, yeah, just go get a divorce and, screw
Right.
relationships. Like, that's not the message that we want to deliver. But
Mm-mm.
it's also, how do you become your best self and live that happy, content life that God wants you to be
Agreed.
when you're in a relationship with a toxic person? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what we got on the same topic with, is like, oh my gosh, like, Lord, like, show us, guide us,
Mhm.
open up doors and tell us what to do. You can't save somebody else, right?
Yeah.
You can't, as much as you love somebody, as much as you wish that you could just save them. You can't, right?
Mhm.
Like, we cannot get people to do the things for themselves if they don't want to.
Right.
You can love somebody for sure. And you can, say that I'm here. I love you. I support you.
Yes.
I want to help you. I want to do all these things,
Mhm.
but they have to want to receive that from you first. And I think that if somebody's not in the place to be able to get healing, to be able to want to be seen, I want to say, is the best thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people have wounds, and as long as everything just is, and especially like men are better at this than women, and maybe not, maybe there's more women. I've always been so into personal growth. Like, I dive head in, like,
Same.
I'm like, let's get into the dark stuff. Let's figure it out.
Yes.
Right. I feel like I do that so often. However, I think the problem is not everybody is that way, right? Not everybody wants to dig into the roots. And I think especially men who are busy, who
Mhm.
are the providers, who want to be strong, they don't want to feel vulnerable, and they
Right.
just feel like, why? What's the point, right? What's the point of going down that path? Like, it happened, like, it
Yeah.
is what it is. But if you don't
Do
look
that.
within the things inside, they will show up in your marriage, and
Mhm.
they will allow
Right.
things for your women not to be able to come in. They will allow you not to have that connection and that support, because there's so many broken people in this world. And I think there's a lot of broken men. And this is not to bash men by any
No.
means, because there's a ton of broken men, but there's also a ton of broken women. And I love men, and I I loved being married. I loved being a wife. I wanted to be in that role to be able to help each other become their best selves. But as soon as I saw my person at the time, with my ex that, we are just going through a divorce right now. As soon as I saw the person,
Brokenness.
you see the brokenness.
Mhm.
And I was asking God to show me the brokenness.
Mhm.
They didn't want to see the brokenness. And
Right.
that's okay too. Like, this is the thing where it's like, this is our journey. Is I saw it. I said, look, like, I'm here, like, we're married, like, let's do this. I want to help. I want to support. I want to
Right.
do these things.
We have
I'm
to.
not going anywhere, but you have to acknowledge the brokenness first.
Yes.
You have to also want the love and support that your partner is providing
Mhm.
to help get you through it. And unfortunately, sometimes it's just not received. And I think that that's the best of this podcast, is because for me, in my situation, I wasn't the mother of his children, right? And so it's like, it's a lot different. I think when you are a mother of the children, like, how long do you put up with
Yes.
what do you do?
What do you
Right?
do?
What do you do? I think that's like the question of the day is, but I was listening to something, and the Cliff Note version of it, it said, you can't want healing for someone more than they want it for themselves.
Yes.
As a loving Christ-filled woman, I
Mhm.
think it's important that you tell the people in your life, I see you, I love you, I'm here for you.
Yes.
But I can't be the only one to see you, to love you, and show up for you. You have to also see what you're not wanting to see. You need to love yourself to know that you deserve to be set free of those things that are holding you back.
Mhm.
And you need to lean into God
Mhm.
and let him heal you.
Mhm.
I think that's the hardest part
Yeah.
for in
Ev-
relationships, is like, how do you get on the same page of
Yes.
wanting healing? How do you get on that same page?
So it's interesting because God has been telling me for months now in my marriage to move. But that's all he said, right? He just said move. And so being new to God and nurturing this relationship with him and really just growing it has been amazing, but I also feel like it was kind of hard to understand at first. And so when God told me to move, I took that as literal, and I was like, okay, like, so maybe, I need to move out. Maybe that's what this means.
Mhm.
And I do still think today that that is what he meant, but I think more what he meant is move out of my way.
Mhm.
You have become your husband's higher power just because of, codependency and what happens in marriage. You guys become each other's person,
Mhm.
but sometimes it can be so much that we literally make them our higher power
100%.
on
Yes.
accident.
Yes.
And before we know it, then we're, blaming them for things
Yep.
that aren't, and so it gets really, really toxic. So when God was telling me to move, I didn't listen at first. I heard him and I was like, okay. And then to act on that when you are married and you have a home, and to just look at your husband one day and say, I think I need to move out, is detrimental. It is just heartbreaking to
Mhm.
say, it's heartbreaking to hear.
Mhm.
And then to actually execute that is even more heartbreaking, because it's like, what is happening,
Mhm.
But for me, I was just I knew God had a plan. I knew his plan was
Mhm.
bigger than I could even imagine.
Mhm.
And I knew I had to trust it.
Mhm.
And so fast forward, where are we? Almost 6 months later, I kind of regressed because it's hard. It's hard to be in God's will all the time.
Oh yeah.
And it's hard to know, God, is this really what you want for me?
Well, because it's painful,
It's
first of
so
all, and
painful.
you sometimes God's process is slow,
Yes.
and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, okay, like, what's happening? Like,
Yes.
you want answers. I want the blueprint.
I
I want the blueprint. I want to
Mhm.
know what's going to happen. But I think that that's where the fully surrendering comes in.
Yep.
And I think that that's where, I know in my life, like, I mean, you can't, and I think this is hard, right? And this is something that I deal with, is I didn't want to lean a ton into the hope
Mhm.
because of the fear of
What if-
that person's actions are not showing that they're interested in changing whatsoever at all. So I didn't really allow myself to go there. I just was like, you know what, Lord, like, your will to be done. And I don't want to try to control the outcome.
Right.
And so if you truly do fully surrender and trust that God's plan is the plan,
Mhm.
and I think that it's hard to do. Like, it's easier to say, because there's definitely times when you're like, okay, maybe God just forgot. Let me
Yeah.
just send this little scripture right over, or let me
Yeah.
just pop in and remind this person, like, it's just, you want to intervene because you want to take control, because
Yeah.
we don't want to wait. But I think that also too, I think what I learned through this process is I definitely dealt with like abandonment stuff from my childhood growing up. Right? I came from a broken family too. And I have amazing parents, but they were young when they got married as well. When my parents found out they were pregnant with me, they actually found out like the same week that my brother had leukemia. And that, back 20, what was that? 40. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm only 40 this year, you guys.
I know.
So, okay, 39 years ago, leukemia was like a death sentence, right? I think there was like 10 other kids in his unit, is what they called it, like his floor, that was in leukemia, and he was the only one that survived. And so, my parents were in this fight or flight, terrified state of, their son, my brother was only 4 years old at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And was dying, right? And so my mom was so scared, so stressed, so in survival mode. And I think that a lot of that played into, just them being human, and like, how did they respond and how did they react on that? And so, it poured into my childhood of just unstable environment. And so, which created in me abandonment issues. And so that goes back to the whole point of this is, if you have boundaries, right? And I think that that's what's so important in a healthy relationship, to be a healthy human. Like, there are certain things that are unacceptable to me, right? There are certain things that are just my hard no's, right? And everybody might be different.
I love that. Let's talk about that really
Yeah.
quick. What are some of your non-negotiables?
Gosh, well, infidelity for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Like, I think that that's a big one. I'm gonna say, I think obviously I like to be a good, honest person, right? Like, I don't want to be with somebody that's not an honest, good human being in the world, that's like looking to take advantage of other people, things like that. So that would be a non-negotiable for me. Deeper than that for me has always been, I have a very hard time with, I'm gonna say, the darkness of like the porn world. That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
I would say faith,
I was gonna say, is God
that's a big
non-
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, when I met my ex at that point in time, I think he knew who God was. Like, he said that he knew God.
Right.
But I wasn't walking with God. And honestly, I felt like I was confused on, honestly, at that point, who God was, because I just was angry with God for taking Jim. And so I think, as much as values for me, like, you have to have the same values. You have to have the same values, which is God. I think politics, honestly, like, you have to have the same values on that.
Yep.
And I would say there was a lot of things that are non-negotiables, that it's more like of your value system, right? Like, what do you stand for as a human being?
Yep.
And then a few things, obviously, that are just the absolute no's. And I would say, like, alcoholism, right? Like, anybody, like drugs, like, I am a zero tolerance for drugs. I always drank, so I can't say alcoholism, because I don't feel like I'm an alcoholic. I didn't struggle ever with anything like that, but I've always liked to drink socially. But it has been a negative impact in my life for sure.
So I feel like these are non-negotiables, which is so great. But then it's like, what happens when these non-negotiables come up in marriage? And that, I think, is like even the bigger thing, because how do we navigate that? And that's kind of, I know what we were talking about a little earlier, but
because you get into these relationships when you're young and you don't have boundaries and you don't have non-negotiables. And in my first marriage with my late husband, I remember struggling a lot because I had abandonment problems, right? So I was scared to set boundaries, because I knew that if I put a boundary down that he didn't like, I was terrified that he would have leave, right?
Yep.
And then there's so many other fears of that, right? So, okay, we're now 20 years old, having kids. We had 2 kids at this point when I was wanting to set boundaries. And, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I relied on him so much. I relied on him, obviously, financially, but I also emotionally.
Of course.
I think I was so fearful of losing what I had, and that people don't stick around, that trauma of actually holding a boundary. Like, I would threaten a boundary all the time. If you don't do this, I'm going to leave. And then I would be getting a fight, and I'd leave to my mom's house, and then we'd get back together. We were on the same roller coaster. I'm not kidding, for 10 years.
Yeah.
I want to say yeah, probably 10 years, from like 21 to probably like 30.
Yeah.
And it was just this roller coaster of not a true boundary, right? It was more of a tactic. Like, okay, I'm gonna set this,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this, but I didn't really hold fast to it.
Yep.
And then you lose credibility, right? You
Yep.
threaten things all the time and then you don't follow through.
Yes.
And then they don't take you seriously anymore.
Yes.
And so I think, again, getting married at 20 years old, you don't know what your boundaries are. Everybody's, drinking and young and immature.
Right.
And, it's like, how do we help our kids? How do we navigate how to find or when like a good partner at that time? And I think that that's truly if you're following God's will.
Agreed.
And you listen, because there are rules in place. And the reason that I always like, oh, the rules are the rules. Like, it's fun to go out and enjoy life and do all the things of this world. But on the flip side is like, there are so many consequences to it, because I don't know if there, I know that there's a lot of people out there. I have a lot of girlfriends, I have a lot of friends. I know that so many people struggle in their marriages because of all of the things of this world. They just impact every single day our relationships. And it's hard to navigate when, again, somebody has a struggle, and that struggle, you're just like, okay, like this is interfering with my life too.
Yes.
Right. And I love you, I chose to marry you, but I didn't
Choose.
either the struggle, either you knew it was there and you naively married the person, or the struggle came out later. Like in my situation, I didn't know about this, right? Struggles.
And
so
same for me.
Okay. Yeah. So you get married and then you wake up and you're like, oh, shoot, like that's a big thing. Like, how are we going to navigate it? Well, when the other person's like, well, you married me and I'm not interested in changing, right? What do you do?
I feel like that's so hard because I think it's different for everybody. You have to pick your hard, right? You're going to pick your hard if you are going to stay in the marriage and work through it. You have to pick your hard if you're going to not stay in the marriage. And whose choices are those, because you both have a choice, and marrying those two choices and making sure that they align together, like we're both going to work on it, or we're not, or one's going to work on it and one's not. It's so hard to just navigate that alone. But first of all, making sure you're on the same page. And I know that this is kind of where our stories take a little bit of like a different turn. I feel like, for me, my husband has really been willing to work on his issues, and and his issues stem from when he was a little child, and it really and I might get emotional, so forgive me, but it breaks my heart, because when you're that little and you are in just such abuse, I mean, the abuse is just crippling to hear at my age. It really, you have to think about how that impacts a person, right? So he went through so much abuse that he just, when we met, he was like, I love you, but I'm going to love you from here. And I have always been trying to get into his heart, but when God was telling me to move, he meant move out of my way so that I can get to your husband's heart, heal him, and then see what happens. I don't know what the end is. I hope that the end is that we come back together and that we fix this and we are both healed by the Lord. But that's my hope. And I don't know, I just have to continue on this path of next indicated step and what God's opening those doors, and then I'll walk through those doors that are open type of thing. But it's just, when you have a person that's willing, there's still such a struggle, because you're going this back and forth. And then you have a good day, and then you have like 4 bad days, and you just regress, and we're human, right? So like when we say we're going to forgive, we can forgive, but I feel like knowing how to forgive, like God forgave us, is
we're not God. Like we're not going to be able to forgive that way.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe we can. I haven't been able to do that quite yet, but I mean, I'm working on it.
So it's interesting, because for me, I remember for the 8 years that we have been together, my husband has been, because of his childhood, a very controlling person, because if he is not in control of what is happening, he feels very out of control, because his whole life he was not in control, and these things were being done to him, and he was just, I think, feeling very out of control. Now, I'm not trying to speak for him, but this is kind of what he's told me. And so he was very controlling, and I won't get into specifics, but it wasn't his fault, in a sense. And then it was his fault in a sense, because we can only once it's brought to us and we're becoming self-aware that we have this problem, then it's like, what do we do to fix it? You know? And I love your analogy of like the smoke and the fire. Like there's smoke, right? Like all of these like red flags are going off, but like, where do we find the fire to put the fire out? And that usually stems from things that are so deep, suppressed and so deep. And to get somebody who's in their 40s or 50s who has thinks that they've dealt with these things, but really has not, because it keeps coming up in all aspects of marriage. So for instance, the abuse, right? The abuse was so bad for my husband that that he had a really hard time with letting anybody watch our son for fear that maybe abuse would happen when we weren't around. And so for us, he just didn't allow it. And it really impacted our marriage in a very hard way because we never had that alone time. And that alone time is so important.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have it
100%.
To reconnect and to, you know, just get back on the same page, especially when you have little kids or even older children.
Yeah.
It's just important.
Totally. Well, I think that goes back to, again, it just is like, how much grace, God, are you supposed to give somebody? Right. And I think that that's always the question. And I think that everybody's answer is going to be different. Right. I think that everybody, and I think that's where it's like following your own internal compass, and that, you know, I would never advise somebody to leave a marriage. Like, that's not what I'm advising. And I know that you feel the same way. I mean, you fought for your marriage. You're fighting for your marriage. You're actually going through an amazing course right now for your marriage. However, you can't want healing more than the person wants to be healed. You know, you can't do it for them. And I think a lot of times, and I noticed for me too, is dealing with abandonment crap is, and maybe ego even too, is it's hard not to make it about you, right? It's hard, like, okay, well, if they loved me enough, like if, you know, we had something that was so good and so special, and how could they not choose me?
Right.
Where then we make it all about us, right? And I think that that's what's very hard on people. And that's why I think people are scared to set boundaries, is because that fear of like, oh my gosh, what if they don't respect that boundary? Then it makes about our value, about us being enough. Then we take it that way. But that's lie. That's not the truth, right? Everybody's choices and journey have nothing to do with your value or your worth. It genuinely has to do with their own internal struggles. And I think that depending on the situation, but if you're in a relationship and it is so hard, where you're just struggling every single day and you just are living in misery for years and years and years, is I don't believe God wants that either.
No.
I think that you're doing your part, you're being obedient, you're healing, you're growing, you're seeking, you're learning, you're listening to God. I think that it is our job, especially as women, as strong women, that to heal yourself enough and to hold boundaries. To respect yourself, to teach your kids, right? To teach our sons how to treat women, what a respectful, good marriage looks like. I don't want my daughters to see the toxicity of a difficult, and not, I mean, they already have. I was married for 20 years with their dad, and it was difficult, right? You know, and so now that I'm older and I, you know, can choose to be in a relationship with somebody, it's so important to me to make sure that it's a relationship that they can mirror and see and have tools and learn tools, because I was never given those tools. I was never given something that I could utilize as a lesson. Like I've never actually even I can't even honestly think of anybody in my family. I don't think there's one person in my family that has not been divorced. And that has had like the ideal marriage, right? Like, so I never saw what that looked like. I know it's possible, and I read a lot of books and I see and listen to other couples that have been together for a long time, and you're like, wow, like I love that. But I think what I've learned is it takes two healthy humans coming together to become that. And if you're choosing a partner when you're unhealthy, I don't care if you're 20 years old or if you're 39 and a vulnerable widow, right? If you make a bad decision, I don't think God wants you to have to stay in that for the rest of your life. And I think that, you know, when I got into a relationship my second time around, I wasn't walking with God. So is it like you're just having to now be punished for like the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life because of one decision that we made? Is like God wants us to forgive ourselves. And I think that God wants us to follow his path. And so if there's any advice, I feel like we both have been good at is when things got so difficult, and so hard, and it was so dark in our relationship. I was
Yeah.
like, there was just this heaviness, and I'm telling you guys, like, to like a physical level.
Oh, yes.
I had never been in so much physical pain, like my hands, my feet, my back, my neck. I was like, what is going on? Like, and just emotionally, I felt like a zombie. Like I literally felt like, I look back at like pictures of myself and I felt like I was like this walking zombie
Right.
because I was so drained emotionally. And that's because Satan was hooked in our marriage.
Oh,
Like there
yeah.
was darkness in our relationship. And as soon as I remember, like, just, I was being so, I felt so defeated. We were in all the therapies, all the counseling, all the things. And I was like, God, what is going on? I was like, I literally like on my knees crawling back to God. Like, I can't do this by myself.
Yes.
And God filled me with his spirit. I swear to you, it was like this light switch that went on where
Yeah.
it just, the pain went away, the fog went away, that everything went away because God came in and he showed me and he gave me his light back. And so, and I wanted that in my marriage. I wanted to bring that light into the marriage, but you can't force somebody else to receive it.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the hardest part. And
Yes.
it's trusting that God is working in that person's life on whatever that plan looks like. But we don't have control. We can be the example, right? And I
Yes.
feel like being kind and loving, and I just feel like trying to take the high road, which is hard when you're a human and you're hurt and you're
Ugh.
pissed and you're just like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Yeah, taking the
Yeah,
high
there's
road.
a lot of times that I didn't want to take the high road
Yeah.
and you're like just pissed. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any means, that I haven't done things that I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't have done, but the truth is like you just have to give it over to him fully. And I think that listening to that internal compass is like my
Yes.
biggest thing that we just don't do,
We just,
you know, because we're fearful. We're fearful that if we stand for something, that the people that we love may not
be there.
be there. And that's hard.
So it's super hard. And I feel like that's exactly where I'm at in my marriage right now. We're at this standstill of, um, you know, of me putting up a boundary and him putting up a boundary as well. But his boundaries are more silent. And I think that he's just starting to figure out the boundary stuff. But for me, you know, it was just as simple as like, we will never lay hands on each other. We will not speak to each other disrespectfully. Because what that does is it causes so much underlying hurt. When you talk to each other disrespectful and doing all these things, it hurts, and on top of hurt, on top of hurt. And then before you know it, you're so hurt that you can't see past the hurt to get to the solution and to get to the forgiving and the amends and all the things that, you know, come after the reconciliation. If that's your path and if that's what you're choosing. And so, full circle, where I'm at right now is a very
Does your husband, is he like angry? Like you think you're like this high and mighty God now?
So it's interesting. At first, I think that's kind of how it might have come off. And God kind of told me, like, he said attraction rather than promotion. You know, when it comes to speaking about the Lord, I feel like it's very much, we want to kind of show it through our actions rather than speaking about it so much. I don't ever want to come off as this person who talks about talking about God and then doesn't practice those principles. I would rather practice the principles and have my life be emulating him so much that people come to me, like how I came to you. Exactly perfect example. How I reached out to you and I was like, Loni, you know, like, let's talk, because I know that we have some stuff in common. Never did I know it was so almost the same story.
Yeah.
But that's, I feel like, how God wants it. So once I realized that that's what he was trying to show me and tell me, and then by telling me to move out of the way, you know, that also was a very scary thing. But so yes, my husband was a little bit put off at first, and but he did come around, and now seeing him come around is really beautiful. But I had to literally move out of our home, and we are having to do this separated because us underneath the same roof right now is just so toxic. And so I guess what I want to really bring light to is that wherever you are at in your marriage or in your divorce or wherever your journey, you are not alone. And God is with us, but like, you are so not alone in the feelings that you're feeling and how hard it is. Nobody talks about the hard because
Yeah.
that's what the enemy doesn't want.
Mhm.
The enemy doesn't want us talking about all of
Mhm.
these real subjects because it will bring light to them and people will like start coming up with solutions.
Totally.
And
Well, I think that so many people struggle with
oh,
so many things. I mean, and from the outside looking in, I mean, so many people look happy and they look like
right.
they're like it's like this perfect thing,
Yep.
perfect relationship, perfect marriage. And the truth is it's such a facade. I mean, obviously we all know social media is very fake, right?
Oh,
And I think that
yes.
has always been like such a huge thing that I
Mhm.
portrayed a fake life for a very long time. I mean,
Agreed.
everybody, nobody wants to show the dirt, right? Like
Mhm.
like the hard. Everyone just shows the highlights, and it's like that's what it is. But I do think that when God has been laying on my heart to share, just my story, I think that it was like, you need to be like the real story, Lonnie. And it's
Mhm.
hard, right? Because
Mhm.
this is two people here. Like it's not just me. And like you have to take other people's feelings into consideration. And it's like
Right.
careful on like how to navigate this, like where you're just again respecting both parties. And it's
Yes.
really easy to throw the people under the bus. It'd be nice to
Yeah.
just like whatever, like screw that person. However, I think that God has just always said, Lonnie, show kindness and show my love through you.
Yes.
And it's when you just lead with love, I think that it is easier to show up with like a genuine, honest heart because I do care about people. I care about everybody that's involved in the situation here. And I don't want to hurt anybody.
Mhm.
But I also know for whatever reason, God is like, this needs to be talked about.
Right.
This needs to be, there's so many women and men out there that are in the struggle
Yeah.
and they feel alone and they feel defeated. And then what happens a lot of times is people either they end up just in these horrible toxic divorces. They end up staying in a miserable relationship and there's adultery, there's, just sneaky going on. Like
Right.
there's not like the love and connection and becoming like a strong power couple, right? Like that's always was my dream. Like
Same.
I want to be the strong power couple, but
Yes.
that takes showing up as your best self and having your partner show up as their best self. And it takes equal growth. And you have to choose well, I think, but in
Mhm.
order to choose well, you have to be well.
Right.
And so it's like get well and give it to God, become your whole self,
Mhm.
and just trust that God is going to keep people in your life or remove people out of your life. Whatever is meant to be will be. And I think that all the journeys are different. But I don't think that somebody that, made a bad decision maybe to get into a relationship where it's an abusive relationship or they're,
Right.
cheating on you all the time or
No.
they're hurting you or, even emotional abuse. My gosh, like that
Oh,
part is almost
so
worse. I'd rather just like, just hit me already.
yeah. I know.
Just kidding.
No, we're
Don't do
kidding.
that.
Yeah, no,
However, but I'm just saying, like,
it makes it
it
easier.
almost would make it easier. But I think if it was like just emotional abuse is so painful, yet everybody just thinks that it's like, not everybody, but it's like you just accept it because it's like, okay, well, they're not physically
Yeah.
hurting me, but I mean, what they do to your mental state,
Mhm.
like your physical being, like it's
It's so
hard.
hard. And I can speak personally for this, that before I started walking with the Lord, I became very critical of my husband. And I mean, like, so critical to the point to everything that came out of my mouth was just defeat to him. It was just kicking him when he was down because I was so hurt by his actions that I just was just trying to claw at anything. I'm like, well, maybe if he sees how hurt I am,
Mhm,
then he'll change.
mhm.
And I just kept hitting or hurting him, not hitting him. I just kept hurting him and hurting him and hurting him until I realized one day I was like, I have broken this man's spirit. And I am so ashamed, and that's where the forgiveness comes in because I didn't know I was doing that. And I am so sorry to him. And I'm so sorry to our marriage and myself and to God because that's not what he intended. For me to get relief and for me to get the anger taken away so that I can forgive, I had to give it to God.
Mhm.
And I had to sit in the apartment that I was renting on the floor for 5 hours with a very good friend of mine who's also, very walks in God's path. And it took us just kind of like your same thing with your the girl that you see.
Lupita.
Lupita,
Mhm.
yes. So I was literally sitting on the floor and of my apartment and I was so angry, and the enemy was just like making me spit out this just vulgar just behavior. And I was just, I was so riddled with anger. I couldn't see past it to forgive.
Yeah.
But that's when I super surrendered. I feel like surrendering is like a constant thing that
Oh,
I
totally.
continue to do.
Yeah.
So like maybe if you don't feel, you don't just surrender one time.
Yeah.
You
It
have
happens
to,
like throughout the whole day.
yeah, exactly. You have to, because we're human. And
Yeah.
so we keep getting back on our own horse and doing our own will. And then we realize, oh, no, no, no. And then you surrender again.
Mhm.
And so I was in my apartment and I was just surrendering to God because the pain was so intense. And I knew the enemy just had me hooked. And I was just disgusted with my behavior. And I was like, God, please, I cannot do this myself. I cannot, the pain that I feel, I can't, it's too much for my soul to bear. Like I was just, and so, throughout that 5 hours, I woke up the next morning and the pain and the anger had subsided in a way that was like literally magical.
Wow.
And God told me, now you go to your husband and you give him a hug and you tell him you forgive him. And my heart was just like, do what? But it was this whole, like, just this, it was
Even though he wasn't asking for you to forgive him?
exactly. And that's where it's God.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't asking for my,
Did he want you to forgive him?
no, there was nothing. It was just, I needed to forgive him for me.
Yeah.
For me to grow and for me to get past this, I had to forgive him.
Got it. So it wasn't for him.
It wasn't, it was for me.
Got it. I
And
like
God knew that. And so that was like step one, is like getting past that anger and surrendering it to God, and then actually being able to forgive,
Mhm.
and now step two is actually, well, for us, is just navigating this whole journey together of this weird gray area that we're in,
Mhm.
and setting those boundaries and saying, hey, like, I'm a married woman, but I do have this is what I will accept. Thank you. And this is what I will not.
Mhm.
And same for him and same for you, it goes, but I feel like having God kind of direct that is the only way it will work,
Mhm.
because that's just the only way,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that is. And I think that if there's one thing that we can say for this whole podcast and just for this whole, like, almost like lesson, we're, again, not the experts. We're just sharing our experiences and
Our journeys.
our journey.
Totally.
And hopefully you can identify with
Yeah.
the similarities instead of the differences, but really the whole, God is the reason
Mhm.
for all of this.
Mhm.
God is the reason that we are together at this instance. And God is the reason that, people are removed from your life and that
Mhm.
people are put in your life.
Mhm.
And it's so beautiful, so
Mhm.
like, I guess if you're just feeling alone and defeated and just hurting, surrender it to God. And when I say surrender to God, what that looks like for me is literally screaming out to him, sobbing my eyes out. I was like screaming in a pillow, but the pain was just so intense. My son was like asleep in the other room. I just couldn't physically,
Yeah.
the pain was so great. And
Yeah.
everybody knows, if you've been in that much pain, like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know exactly what I'm
Heartbreak
talking
is
about. Yeah.
rough, man.
But we can't do it alone,
No.
and so it's, I guess, just for me and my journey, like, forgiveness was so big. And it's so interesting um because at my church we have this program, and it's called, I'm just going to leave out what it's called, but anyways, it teaches couples how to communicate. And this week, out of all weeks, is about forgiveness,
Mm.
and so it just, I feel like, ties in so much. But they teach you how to do the things that I was never grown
Mhm.
up seeing.
Mhm.
I was never grown up seeing healthy relationships, like talking about money or
Mhm.
talking about sex. Those are my two, I can't even touch those two topics
Mm.
because I never had anybody healthy enough show me,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
so those are big things in my marriage that I've struggled with.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. So this program that we're in, and we're doing it together, separated. But it's just been so beneficial
Mhm.
for me as an individual,
Mhm.
and what I'm getting from it. It's just kind of like what you went to last night.
Mhm.
Same thing,
100%. Yeah.
so
Well, I think it's just constantly keeping to like kind of dig deep and,
Exactly.
figure it out. And honestly, I think to get right on the right path is you
Mhm.
kind of have to clear the old path, right? You're just like,
Yes.
where'd the path go?
Where
I'm not
exactly.
sure where it's at. I can't find it. However, you do have to go through the weeds in order to get to the clear path.
Yes.
And I think that, we're both kind of in the navigating of the weeds. I think that, obviously you've been in this journey a lot longer, but, I think that you're in the sense of actually,
Doing something.
a few months maybe behind where I'm at.
Right.
But it's just the journey, and it's just trusting that God's in control. And just, again, it was just respecting yourself and loving yourself and having healthy boundaries and sticking to them. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And it's so much easier said than done.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is for sure.
Mhm.
And I think, it's making sure that those boundaries are coming from a healthy place. And maybe even if you don't know how to set boundaries, talk to somebody, go and find an expert that can help advise you on what do healthy boundaries look like. Because a lot of times I think we don't even know that. Like, right. Like, I mean, if I were to go back to my 20-year-old self, man, to like my brain today is like, you just don't know what you don't know. And, there's just, when you don't have the, picture painted for you when you're young of what it should look like, then you just don't know. But what's crazy is I heard on the opposite end of that, a gal tell me that her parents had the perfect relationship growing up. I mean, she's like, it was like the perfect model of a family. They loved each other. They were supportive. They would, change and grow and do things better for each other, like very successful. Like she's like, it was like the perfect model. And the naive part that she felt on the other end of that is she thought everybody was that way. Right. So when she got into a relationship, she was shocked that there was like actually like another side here of somebody that possibly maybe isn't like a good human being, right? Or that they didn't do things that you thought that they would do. And so, we have to, again, stop putting things in other people's buckets, right? It's just, I think the law of attraction, I think is real. And I think that you attract what you are. And so just the better that you become, the more clearer that you become, the healthier that you become, the more connected with God that you become, it puts you just on a whole nother energetic level. And I mean, it's crazy how people come to you. So you're like, you look around and I'm like, God removed a lot of weeds out of my life. And I'm grateful for that. And it was a painful process. The pruning is freaking painful. Oh, it's so painful. It is painful. And you just want, I mean, and for me, I mean, I want what's best for everybody. And that's the truth. I would, if I could heal people, I would in a heartbeat. Absolutely. I would do whatever I could to heal. But surrendering it to God and trusting God that He is in control and that you cannot change people, you cannot heal people, you cannot want it for somebody more than they want it for themselves. And just stop focusing on them so much and focus on you and start becoming the person that you want them to be. Become the person that you want them to be. And do all of the work inside for you. Don't do it for them, do it for you. And put that energy there. And you're either going to influence them because you've become the person that God's meant you to be. And they see that you have that light shining out of you and that the contentment, and they see what you've transformed into. And it either is going to strive them to become that, or it's not. And it's going to deflect them like, I have no desire to do that. And either outcome is you have to be okay with it. And I think that's the hardest part. Is accepting either outcome. And that's where truly is just putting your ego aside, putting your self-worth aside, knowing that if the person isn't like, wow, that person's amazing, I'm going to change for them, they're never going to do that. It has nothing to do with you. They're going to change because they want to feel better themselves. They want better for themselves, or they don't. So it has nothing to do with who you are or who you're becoming. It's their own personal journey, their own personal choices. And you just have to give it over to God. But I mean, like, was it Mother Teresa that said that? Be the change you want to see in the world. And I think that that's the truth. We need more healed, healthy people out there. And we need more people speaking up saying, look, we're all messed up. We have issues. Like, this world is hard. Life is freaking hard. And relationships are hard and healing is hard and all the things are hard. But also staying the same and living in misery and putting your head in the sand, that's also freaking hard too. So it's like, choosing
choose
hard.
choosing hard is like, it's such it's so crazy. I feel like, you know, choosing your heart is really just, it's so personal,
Oh yeah,
it's so
100%.
personal, because like me choosing my heart is so much different from you choosing
Yep.
your heart, and maybe our spouse is choosing their heart.
Yep.
And I think that for my husband, at least, he's trying to choose his heart, and for him, he does not want a divorce, and nor do I. But at the same time, you can only do the same thing expecting a different result so many
Insanity. It
times.
goes crazy.
It's
Yeah,
literally, yes.
totally.
So until, but for you, and for, where you're at in your journey, your ex, he didn't want to choose,
Mm-mm.
he didn't want to have anything to do with.
Well, it's not, I think acceptance is hard,
It's
right?
so hard.
It's hard. And I think that, looking, it's not everybody wants to change.
No.
Not everybody wants to live the life connected with God. And because Satan has a lot of people fooled that,
Oh, yeah.
that path is just fun, and that they're just not willing to give up the things that they feel they have to give up. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna say I struggled with that too.
Oh yeah, me too.
With just giving up, and I'm gonna say giving up the worldly things is like, I love to have fun. Like I'm very much love to go out. I like to have a good time. I like to these things. Is it's I think that the battle is you feel like you're sacrificing, because that's how I felt. Like I don't want to sacrifice all my fun, right?
Yeah.
But truly, it doesn't feel that way at all, right? It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. But I think that that's Satan fooling you.
Oh yeah.
And just saying like, you're gonna lose so much, and you have to choose this boring, hard,
right,
strict, narrow path. But that's really not what it feels like. It's actually extremely fulfilling. It's really freeing and comforting and peaceful. I think that's the best word I can choose, is because I have not felt at such peace and ease in a very long time, because I have not been on the path in a very long time. And it just feels right. It's just clear, and it's smooth, and it's easy, and not getting on the path wasn't easy.
No.
Making the decisions wasn't easy.
No.
I felt like I was in the storm trying to like crawl my way through. Like I literally felt like I was in battle. Like, what is happening? Everything around me, every part of my life was so hard and so confusing. I was so lost. I didn't even know who I was. I remember looking in the mirror and just being like, what is happening? When Jimmy was sick and life has been difficult, like I've never been so lost and confused in my entire life as I was a few months ago. And I think God does that though. So you have no other choice but to surrender.
Exactly.
I was trying to fix everything that I could. And God was like, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse the more that I kept trying to control everything. And as soon as I was like, okay, I can't do this, I give. I remember spending 4 hours in Lupita's session, and just literally, she's like, Loni, you are so disconnected from God. You are so discombobulated. And in 4 hours of just straight praying and reconnecting and saying, Lord, take this, help me, whatever, just I surrender it to you. I remember going home and sharing that. And, the first response was, well, what does that mean for my life? Like,
hold on.
Whoa, like, what do I have to do? And that was the way that it was received. And I'm not asking you to do anything. Like I was telling you, like, this is what's going on in my life. And they saw how miserable I was, right? Like nobody wanted to live with me at that state. I didn't want to live with me at that state. I was miserable. But it was like, it's the fear of what does it look like to surrender it to God? And that immediately it's Satan in you. You can see the darkness in somebody, that they're just, that wall goes up because Satan has such a hook on them and blinds them. And they're just like, whoa, I'm not willing to give this up, because they think that it's going to be painful, because it is.
It is.
Healing is painful.
Healing,
that's true.
it is.
It is painful.
But it's interesting because, I just want to talk about the enemy and how intense he is for a minute, and not give him any light, but I just want everyone else to know that like this is a real thing. There is something called spiritual warfare that is going on around us. And when I first became a believer, I mean, I've been a believer, but when I first got reconnected with God and I started hearing this kind of like verbal, just this type of talk, I guess, spiritual warfare and the enemy and this and that, it sounded so foreign to me. So I want you to know that if it sounds foreign to you, like that's normal. But what I'm trying to say is that there is something going on around us that we cannot see. And it has such power to wreck our lives. Loni was telling me a story, for instance, when I was over here, was the last week. And the enemy was so around and so pronounced at this particular time that when she was telling me this, I literally started to feel physically ill. And that is just insane to me, that I'm just listening to a story, but I felt the darkness so much that it made me physically ill. I was like, oh my goodness, like what you were saying, and I get chills right now, like literally, wow. Because
Satan is real. I think people don't understand. I think that you either believe that there is a God. I mean, a lot of people believe in different gods, you know, in different avenues to get to God. But if you believe in a higher power, whatever that looks like to you, there is a higher power out there that created this world. And if there is a God and you believe that, you have to believe there's a Satan, and that there's evil. And, you know, I think that this world is Satan's world that we are living in. He is the one in control of this world, and he gets in our heads. You know, our brains are of this world, like, right? They've been in here for however many years we've been here, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. These brains are just constantly being stolen and manipulated and tricked by Satan. And we get so confused because we're so disconnected. And I think that that's the point of the world we live in today. Social medias and all the advertisements and all the chaos and the busy. We're the only country, I feel like, in the world that truly are like busy bees that never stop. We never stop. They have us so brainwashed that the world that we live in is normal and this is how God created it. He did not create it. I'm actually very traditional. I wish I could go back to like the old days where it was just like where you could just be like a mom and raise your kids and have your village of women and you had your relationship. And not that it was all perfect and dandy back there. I'm sure there was issues, but where it was just a slower pace of life where people actually, you know, took time to like, they didn't have TVs, they didn't have phones. They would sit in their room and just like stare out the window. You go back at like all these old movies, you know, and you watch and they're like reading or playing the piano and just they're connected with themselves and they're being creative and they're, you know, they're just not distracted. Our brains are going a million miles a minute and we're just so bombarded all the time that the system is to disconnect us. Satan is here to kill, steal, and destroy. And if they can destroy the family unit, then they win. That's the ultimate win. Because now you have broken families, which raise broken children, which we all have become. We're all a product of the system. And that, look at our lives, look how hard and complicated our lives have become. And not that they've all been bad. I mean, I have good highlights in my life, but life has been hard. I mean, that is the truth. Life has been hard. And not that there's not been fun, because there has been, but there's also been a lot of trauma. And, you know, I suffered with major anxiety growing up. I mean, like panic attacks to the fullest. Like I have had so much struggle in my life simply because this world is so lost. And I was born into a very chaotic time. You know, I was born through a chaotic family. I was born in just trauma, and then, you know, got into a young relationship, and then I had children, and it's like it just keeps generationally going. And like I think that God truly is using me in my life to break the change and break the cycle and be aware and see it and say, no, like I'm not passing this dysfunction to my kids. I'm not. And I think that he woke me up. And I think that that's why I feel so passionate. And I think you do too, is that there's something happening in the world that we have to stop and we have to see and realize that evil is real and the world has lost their minds. And if you do not stop and get yourself under control and do the own internal work and do your part in healing from the trauma that's happened to you in this broken world, so you can become healthy enough to have a good, strong relationship. You can be a good, strong, healthy human. We can raise our children to be healthy. Our kids repeat what we do, period. I don't care if you think that you're the best pretender on the planet. I don't think if you think, oh, my kids have no idea what's going on. Genetically, your kids are connected to you. We pass things down on a different level. It's not just do what I do, see what I see. It's they literally repeat by genetics the patterns, the cycles. They just get handed down. It's like a bond between Satan and us. It's like these chains that he has on us, that if we don't break the chain, and even though you can't see the chain, that chain goes now to your kid.
And then the cycle just continues.
Continues.
You know, making our pain our purpose, I feel like for both of us is just kind of what this whole thing is about.
100%.
You know, taking our physical pain and our physical and emotional, all of it, and switching it into something that is, you know, just so powerful and so positive, is kind of all we can do at this point, you know. We're both just on this journey, and we're doing the best we can, raising our kids and trying not to make this cycle just continue to repeat, you know. And it's just, yeah, making our pain, turning it into our purpose, and why we are the way we are, and just shutting that cycle off so that it doesn't continue is kind of all we can hope for, right?
100%. Yeah, I think that is the goal. And honestly, to help people wake up, I think is kind of where I feel like that's why publicly, I feel like God has been pulling on my heart to just like, Loni, the world is sleeping.
Yes.
And we need to have the truth and the vulnerability out there where people say, wow, like, okay, like I'm not the only one. Because people, you can be ashamed, right? I mean, you don't think it's embarrassing to think that I'm a 40-year-old woman that just got married and 3 months later had to file for divorce? Like, that's pretty hard on the ego, right?
Right.
But it's like, okay, this is not about me, right? This is not about me and my poor choices. This is about this is about
us and our poor choices.
And yeah, exactly. No, it's just about truly being real and raw and saying like, look, like I know I'm not the only one that has maybe made a bad decision in our life. And again, I just feel like God just says, you know, speak your truth and do it as gracefully as I can. And I'm not looking to, like I said, hurt anybody. And I want to be respectful on both sides here, but the truth is the truth. And there are hurt, wounded people in this world, and we are all one of them. And we need to heal because we need to heal the family unit. We need to heal so our children can heal. We want to save this world, and we don't want to lose America, because I feel like that's the path that we're going down. Is we are so broken and so lost and so confused in our own lives. We're never going to be able to keep a strong, healthy country functioning because we're not strong, healthy people.
Right.
The mental illness in this country is so bad.
Oh, it's so
bad.
bad.
That's a whole other topic.
That's a whole nother, it's a whole nother topic. But
Exactly.
it's interesting that if you are in this toxic, you know, place in your marriage or in your divorce or wherever you are, and you're not healing yourself, that mental illness is very real. I have had some very, very dark thoughts in my marriage, and I am not that type of person. I thank goodness have never super struggled with mental illness. It's just not part of my story. But the fact that, like, you know, I literally thought, and I'll just share this because it's so real and it's so raw, that I literally thought a few months ago, I would be better off dead. I'm an awful mother. I'm an awful wife. And that is the enemy in
100%.
every way.
Yeah.
And I literally told my husband, I was so scared when this thought came through my head. And like I said, it was totally enemy, but it was so loud and it was so clear. And it was so just like, it was after, you know, a very traumatic event even. So I was already feeling guilty. And then you get this like thought in your head of just end it, because it would be better here without you. No, it wouldn't.
That's absolutely
First of all, no, it wouldn't. But second of all, realizing that is so insane, you know, like it's just such a lie.
Well, Satan, that's his ultimate goal, right? If you fall for his lie and you go to the ultimate and you get to a point where you take your life, he won, right? He won because he's sitting here and he's manipulating. He's such an evil thing, right? And I hate even giving him light, like you say, or even speaking his truth, because I don't want Satan anywhere near me or my family. But the truth is he's real. And if you're not aware of that and you're blind and you're naive, let me tell you, that is the most dangerous place to be in, because he's really easy at fooling you with everything that looks fun and shiny.
Yes.
You know, everything that looks like it's going to be good and it's amazing and all the good things. It's like food, right?
Yeah.
Why is all the
bad
food kills you?
Yeah.
Same thing. It's the same concept, right? Satan is like candy. Like you just like go eat all the sugar and it's going to be so fun and so good. And you get so addicted to the sugar, and then you end up diabetic, or you end up with cancer, or you end up feeling like crap, right? You're just like, why do I have no energy? Why do I hurt? Why do I have so much inflammation? Like, oh, because I'm filling myself with sugar all the time, or all these crappy foods. Satan does the same thing.
Yes.
It's tastes good going down, but it does nothing good for you in the long run.
Right. Yeah. So it's just important to know how real he is. But then on the same token, you can be filled with God's spirit,
Mhm.
and you don't have to worry about that anymore. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, it still is around, but I just feel so much more, since being filled with God and just being so, I just have nurtured this relationship with him. And I'm really just like kind of baffled with how beautiful this relationship with God has become for me, and just all the things that he's opened for me, and just in general. But filling yourself with God and his word and the right things to do, it makes that other evil just not even around you anymore, because it's just kind of like there's
Exactly.
too much of God, and he knows he can't compete with that.
100%. Yeah.
So
Well, we all know at the end of the day that God does win this war.
yes,
And
he does.
there is going to be a battle, and we are in the midst of a battle, but there is
Mhm.
going to be one ultimate battle, and it's our job to pick a team, right?
Yeah.
And I'm all for winning.
Yes.
I like to win.
I like to win too. And see, and so you can win and you can have these nice, fun things and still be on God's path.
100%.
God wants the best for us. Our God is not a God that is punishing,
100%.
but
Yeah.
sometimes he makes us sit in the pain,
Mhm.
because if he had, like, for instance, I feel like for my marriage, he is making me sit in the pain longer than I would like, but it's because if I don't go through that pain, I won't grow,
Mhm.
and I won't do the work.
Totally.
Nobody wants to do, nobody,
Yeah.
when things are
Well,
all
complacency, I think, is a very dangerous place to be.
agreed.
Because when you're complacent and you don't have to, you won't.
Yes.
Because it's uncomfortable and it's hard. I mean, we're not
Yes.
going to sit here and lie and say that healing and growing is easy,
No.
because it's not. But also staying the same and being miserable is not easy either. So like we
Right.
talk about, pick your hard, but it truly takes work.
Mhm.
It takes effort. It takes wanting it. It takes digging deep down and having a big reason why you're doing it. And I think for me, it's always been about becoming my best self, because I'm a mom with two daughters who are going to do what I do and become who I am.
Yes.
So if there's no, like, maybe not doing it as much even for myself as I'm doing it for them, because I want them to live the best lives that they have. And I want
Absolutely.
them to be able to skip a lot of the pain and frustrations and anxiety and stress and all the things that I went through in my life.
Mhm.
I want to teach them and be the example to them, to like life on God's path is just so much easier, and it's still a fun path. I mean, I love my life, honestly. I think that I have an amazing life, and I love to have fun, and I love to just be social, and I love to just be around people that are, I love growth. I love personal growth. I
Mhm.
love working hard for stuff. Like, I love
Mhm.
setting goals. I like making money,
Yes.
so like there's just, I just put my focus on other things. I'm done putting my focus on the same monotony of
Mhm.
just looking at the miserable self of all the things that I wish. I want to get in shape, but I'm tired and I'm busy and this and that. I want to start a podcast, but I
That
just,
takes work,
yeah,
and
it's, you just don't, right? And
Mhm.
then when you have no other choice and like life comes underneath you, I was like, I either can focus on my broken heart and how my life just fell apart,
Yeah.
and woe is me, and go lay in bed and just
Yep.
wallow in the pain.
Mhm.
Or I'm like, I can use this hard time in my life to drive me and
Yes.
push me and motivate me. And that's the path I chose. Like, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do and become the person that God wants me to be. And when you choose that path, it just feels so good.
It does.
It just feels so good.
Surrendering is hard because it's different for everyone, and it looks different for everyone. And my surrendering and what my journey is different than yours. And so you can't, because I remember like watching something that was talking about like laying stuff at Jesus' feet
Mhm.
and saying, here, God, like, please, this is when you give God a problem, like, can you hand it over? Like, what does that look like?
Mhm.
And it can be very confusing, because you wake up the next day and you're like, I gave it to God and I woke up and it's still
Right.
here. Like, what's happening?
Totally.
That's not what we mean when we say give it to God.
Yeah, he's not going to just immediately. Well, not he can.
He can.
There has been times
Yeah.
I've heard that he can't do that, but typically he doesn't.
No.
Strongholds, I feel like, are something that take. I mean,
Time.
time. I mean, I think about it as like a sobriety thing. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, it's every day you wake up and you surrender it over and you work actively to not go down that path, because it's not like you just do it one time and you're just
Done.
perfect.
Nope.
Like, it's a journey and it
Mhm.
takes action, but it also takes action to be lazy and do nothing either. I mean, it's discipline and self-control. I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest one.
Yes.
It's really, if we did what we felt like doing all the time, like I always say, you would be fat, lazy, and broke.
Yep.
Right? Because nobody wants to get up and go to the gym. Nobody wants to have to go to work. Nobody wants to do things. They'd rather just lay on the couch and watch Netflix and eat
course.
bonbons all day.
Yeah.
But where does that get you, right? Fat, lazy, and feeling like crap. Like
Yep.
there's just,
That's
just
not
worth it.
It's just not.
No.
I just yeah. So when I say like I give it to God, for me that means like I surrender it over to him and say, here, like this is too painful for me. This is too, I just need your help with this.
Mhm.
And sometimes waking up the next morning,
Mhm.
like it's really magical that
Oh, yeah.
pain is just lifted.
Totally.
It just
Mhm.
it's almost indescribable. And
Mhm.
so giving it to God is, like I said, it's not giving it to him and
Yeah.
he's
Well,
taking.
I think it's a better word is maybe even trusting.
There you
right?
go.
Trusting when you give it to God, and this is how I interpret it, and I don't want to speak for you,
No,
but
no, of
when
course.
I give something to God,
Mhm.
it again, it's not like a physical, like here, take
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
But it's your heart opening up and saying, I have faith in God's plan, and I'm trusting that and knowing that God is a good God, and that God loves me, and that God loves my family, and that God loves people that are in my life, and that he wants what's best for us, right? And so when you give it to him and you take the control off of you, right? You just lose the control. Like, right, I don't want to be in control of it and try to manipulate it and try to make it work. As Lord, you already have the plan planned out. Like, show me what that looks like. And so for me, surrendering is trusting that whatever happens, and it might not be the outcome that you want. And that's what I'm experiencing right now, right? Like I genuinely thought that God was honestly going to use the situation. I thought, I'm not going to say that. I thought, I'm like, oh, he loves me enough. He said that he loved me so much that I'm the best thing that's ever happened in his life. So to me, I thought that that would have been enough, right? And like, oh, God's going to use that, to mold this person. He's going to heal him. He's going to change it.
Yep.
And that wasn't the case, right? So, I mean, the truth is you never know what the outcome's going to be. And a lot of times it might not be the outcome you want, but you have to be okay with that. And I think that that's for me is like, it's trusting that God knows what's best. And I don't want to be in a relationship for the rest of my life that has darkness in it. I don't. And if the darkness isn't going to be surrendered and healed, God knows that.
Yes.
And God's protecting me, and God's saying, look, Loni, like I want better for you. I want more for you. And I know that that's the truth. And so, yes, can you be disappointed? Was I disappointed that God didn't heal Jimmy? I mean, I was begging for him, and I was mad that God didn't heal him. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
But it's when you have full surrender, when you surrender fully to God, it takes knowing that even though God took Jimmy's life, that his plan is so much bigger than ours. God needed Jimmy at home for some other reason that we don't know yet, right? The story I do believe will be revealed one day.
Yes.
I don't know that story.
Oh my
so
gosh.
why?
Goosebumps all over talking about that.
Why does he take people home? We don't know. We don't, there is no, like he doesn't have to give us an explanation. It's just we have to just trust that God is a good God, and he's a loving God, and he's a kind God.
Yes.
And he's doing what's best for us, even if it doesn't feel like that, right? Even if we were hoping and praying and begging for another outcome, it's sometimes we don't get what we want. And I tell you, when I go to heaven, I'm gonna watch it. I'm like, okay, I have a list.
Yeah. So tell me why.
What was the reason behind this?
Yeah.
No, but it's just the truth. I mean, we just have to trust, and it might be painful because loss is painful, and loss is painful, but also surrendering is also extremely, it lightens the load. It releases the pain.
Yep.
It helps just to accept what is. And I think that that's the biggest lesson that I've definitely learned throughout all of these things that have happened to me, is just surrendering to God and saying, God, I give it to you. I know that you loved Jimmy and that you love my kids. And do I have any idea why you took him home? No, but I believe that there's a bigger plan here that I don't see.
Yeah.
Life's a journey. So, I mean, you just never know what the future holds, but trusting and just doing your part.
Yes.
And I think that that's where I'm at, is like, I just I know who I am and what I deserve, and I have boundaries that are healthy. And if, like I said, if you need help setting boundaries, reach out to somebody because boundaries are a good thing
Mhm.
and stick to them and have an honest heart, have a kind heart, have a heart of love, but also don't have a heart that just gets walked all over and
Right.
manipulated. And, I think it's really easy to be a people pleaser. Just
Yep.
stand for something.
Yep. And that's so true. The people pleasing is easier for me to please you and me be uncomfortable than to get into that if there's a possible
Mhm.
confrontation from me saying no.
Mhm.
And that comes from my childhood trauma. I am so scared of being abandoned also. And so by not people pleasing and by enforcing strict boundaries and really listening to my moral internal compass and saying, no, this is not right for
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
Um, I have become this person that just continues to just be walked all over because I'm so scared of the alternative.
Mhm.
And it's just such an unhealthy place to be.
Totally.
And I can tell you that since I've put these boundaries in place that, my husband and I are not living together currently, and we are separated, and I have moved out of God's way, I see the changing. I see the shift. I
Mhm.
can't, there's no change yet, but there's a definite shift that's happened.
Mhm.
And I can't really explain it,
Mhm.
but it's just, there's a shift and we'll just have to wait and see, but for me and for my path as of right now, I'm just trusting God that he knows exactly what's going to happen. He's seeing the future. He knows that too.
Mhm.
And,
He knows the outcome.
he knows the outcome and that his outcome is better than I probably could have ever expected, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
And that's just, where I am today.
Cool. Well, we're gonna be a future podcast of, we're gonna declare it now.
Yes.
Yes, we're gonna do it with you and your husband. Saying,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
healed.
I hope so. We can only pray to God that we can
Yes.
become that couple,
Of course.
because we have been through so much. I mean, we have had the violence, we haven't had the drinking or drug addiction because we had that prior to meeting. So we're
Checked off the
checking
list.
that box, but we've come through so much trial and tribulation and just hard that if we do make it, I will just be extremely proud of us.
100%.
And only God knows if we're going to. And so, like I said, it's a very gray area, very scary place to be, a lot of uncertainty, but just having the trust that God has got me
In control.
in
Totally.
control.
Totally. And living in the uncertainty is extremely uncomfortable.
Oh, yes.
And it's painful, but it is necessary for transformation.
It is.
It's just necessary. So just stay strong. If you're in a situation and you just feel like you're just being walked all over, or that you just keep going through this darn same cycle,
Yep.
give it to God. Ask him to show you what to do and how to handle this in your situation.
Yes.
And listen and follow. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
But living in that chaos for the rest of your life is also painful and uncomfortable. And then it passes down to your kids.
Yeah.
Break the cycle. Heal. It's so worth it. And you're strong. You can do hard things.
Yeah, we can do. I love that, just picking your hard, but picking the right type of hard.
Exactly. Yes. So choose your heart.
Yeah, choose your heart.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.